The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped into my mailbox like a knife between ribs. I stood at the end of my gravel driveway, still holding my coffee, and read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Notice of violation. Unauthorized livestock on residential property. You have 14 days to remove all chickens or face fines of $200 per day. I looked up at my small farmhouse, the same one my grandfather built in 1952, long before this neighborhood even existed. My 6 chickens clucked peacefully in their coop near the barn. They'd been here for 3 years without a single complaint. I knew exactly who was behind this. Diane Merrick had moved in 2 years ago, bought the biggest house at the end of Maple Ridge Lane, and immediately got herself elected HOA president. She wore pressed blazers to neighborhood meetings, carried a leather portfolio everywhere, and spoke like every sentence was a courtroom argument. She didn't like anything that didn't fit her vision of a premium community. And apparently, chickens didn't fit. I walked back inside, set the letter on my kitchen table, and made a phone call to my lawyer, Tom Hendricks. He'd handled my grandfather's estate and knew the property history better than anyone. "Tom, the HOA is trying to force me to get rid of my chickens," I said. There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. "Do they know about the easement?" "I don't think they know about anything," I replied. "They just see chickens and assume they have authority." "Let me pull the original deeds," Tom said. "I'll call you back in an hour." 53 minutes later, my phone rang. "You're not going to believe this," Tom said, his voice buzzing with energy. "Not only do you have a grandfathered agricultural exemption that predates the HOA by 60 years, but you also own the water rights to the aquifer that feeds every house in that neighborhood." I sat down slowly. "Say that again." "The water rights. They were part of your grandfather's original land grant. When the developers bought the surrounding parcels in the 90s, they never negotiated for the water. Technically, every house on Maple Ridge Lane is using your water." A smile crept across my face. "So if they want to play hardball, you could shut off their water tomorrow," Tom said. "Legally." I let that sit for a moment. I wasn't interested in punishing my neighbors. Most of them were good people. But Diane Merrick needed to understand that her authority had limits. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. I showed up early, took a seat in the back row of the community center, and waited. Diane stood at the front, her blazer crisp, her smile sharp. She called the meeting to order and moved quickly through the agenda: landscaping complaints, pool maintenance, upcoming events. Then she got to enforcement actions. "We've issued a violation notice to a resident keeping illegal livestock," Diane announced, glancing briefly in my direction. "This is a clear breach of community standards. If the chickens are not removed within 14 days, we will begin daily fines and pursue legal action if necessary." A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One older man raised his hand. "Aren't those chickens pretty quiet? I didn't even know they were there." Diane's smile tightened. "The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Carver. We can't have people turning this neighborhood into a barnyard." I stood up. The room went silent. "Diane," I said calmly, "I'd like to address the board." Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't open forum." "I think you'll want to hear this." I walked to the front, pulled a folder from my bag, and placed it on the table in front of her. Inside were copies of my property deed, the agricultural exemption, and the water rights documentation. "My family has owned that land since 1952, I began, my voice steady. "Long before this HOA existed. My chickens are protected under a grandfathered agricultural exemption. You have no legal authority to remove them." Diane's face flushed. "That's absurd. This is a residential community. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I have documentation to prove it. But there's something else you should know." I opened the folder to the water rights page and slid it toward her. "I also own the water rights to the aquifer that supplies every home in this neighborhood. That includes yours." The room erupted in whispers. Diane's face went pale. She picked up the document, scanned it quickly, and set it down like it had burned her fingers. That's not possible, she stammered. It's not only possible, I said. It's recorded with the county. Every house here has been using my water for decades. My grandfather allowed it as a courtesy. I've continued that courtesy. But if you want to void agreements that predate your authority, we can start with that one. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. One of the other board members, a retired engineer named Paul, leaned forward. Are you saying you could legally shut off our water? I could, I said. But I won't. I'm not interested in hurting anyone. I just want to be left alone to keep my chickens in peace. Diane finally found her voice. This is extortion. No, I said firmly. This is property law. You tried to enforce rules that don't apply to me. I'm simply reminding you that I've been a good neighbor. I'd like that to continue. Paul looked at Diane, then at me. I move that we withdraw the violation notice and recognize the agricultural exemption. Another board member seconded it immediately. Diane sat frozen, her portfolio clutched in her hands. The vote was unanimous. I picked up my folder, nodded to the board, and walked out. The following Monday, I received a formal letter from the HOA, on Diane's signature, acknowledging my exemption and apologizing for the misunderstanding. I framed it and hung it in my kitchen, right above the chickens' feed bins. Diane resigned from the HOA 3 weeks later. Rumor had it she couldn't handle the embarrassment. A new president was elected, a kind woman named Carla who baked cookies and asked if she could buy fresh eggs from me. I sold her a dozen for $5. My chickens are still here. The water still flows. And every morning, I stand at the end of my driveway with my coffee, listening to the birds, knowing that some battles aren't won with anger, they're won with old deeds and quiet resolve.